Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the afternoon session. And we want to go right on to take the paper, Taxation, Imperatives for National Growth and Development, Global Best Practice. And this paper will be delivered by Mr. TAIWO OYEDELE, who is a partner and head of tax at PwC. He is the Dean of the Direct Tax Faculty of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria and chairman of the Taxation and Fiscal Management Faculty Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. He is an author, guest columnist, and public speaker on taxation, matters, business, and the economy. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome Mr. TAIWO OYEDELE to take his paper. Mr. TAIWO OYEDELE, please.
Good afternoon. Please permit me to stand on the existing protocols. I know it's a difficult job to talk about tax immediately after lunch, but I'll try my best. And the way I like to go about it is first to look at the topic. Taxation, imperatives for national growth and development, global best practice. Clearly, Nigeria cannot pretend to be an island to itself. We live in a global community. And therefore, there are things we can always learn from the rest of the world, the same way that they have things to learn from us. I always like to say that I have not seen a single country anywhere in the world where people are excited to pay their tax, because it's a difficult thing to do. Therefore, you need to think about best practices, strategy, and so on and so forth to get people to pay and be happy that they are paying. So what I'm going to take us through today is first to look at the history of economic development. The good thing about my slides, my presentation is I've only got about 4 slides. So not too many slides. The not too good news is that if you allow me, I can speak on those 4 slides for 4 hours. But I will not do that. I'll try and keep it brief. So taxation is never a standalone issue. That's why I want to talk about the history of economic development. We'll then look at taxation as a growth catalyst and global best practice, and I'll share my concluding thoughts. I don't know whether we can see this slide, but this slide is such an important slide, and I need everybody to pay attention to it. If you go back, if you say we are in 2018, 2018 means 2018 after the death of Christ, right? That's how they do numbering. So this research we are looking at on the screen was a research done by some professors going back in time and looking at human development and economic growth. They found out that immediately after the death of Christ, that if you look at the countries that were leading the world, it turns out that India was the most powerful country in the world. And it was followed by China. And you have the major countries that have led the world are the countries we have here. China, India, Japan, US, France, Germany, Italy, and Britain. Now, in the 11th century, it was still India that was the world's most powerful country, and China was growing. If you fast forward to the 17th and 18th century, America started appearing. Before then, there was no America in this graph at all. America started appearing in the 17th century, and by the early 1900s, America had taken over as the world's most powerful and most developed economy. And it has remained so until now. Now, but the very important message I want you to get from this analysis is today, the world refers to India and China as developing economies. Can you imagine? These were the guys who were the most developed for more than 500 years. And now they are being referred to as developing. In fact, they even came up with BRIC and said, look at this guy, they are growing, The same lesson that Nigeria needs to learn. Lesson number one is, even if you are developed and you become complacent or you slow down, other people will overtake you. Such that development in itself is a process, not a destination. So if America slows down, maybe in another 250 years, if this world remains, maybe somebody will be talking about America as a developing economy. So if they say Nigeria is developing, don't feel too bad. It's a process. We'll soon get to the process of development. So having said that, I'm going to move on to my second slide, which is about taxation as a growth catalyst and what are the imperatives. I said earlier on that it's always difficult to pay tax, and I'm sure everybody in this hall will agree with me. It is difficult to pay tax. And the reason is not far-fetched. It's because when you pay tax, you don't see the direct benefits. So this Lagos that we are in now, if your personal income tax in a month is 10 million, and a Danfo driver pays only 1,500, when you are driving on the road, the guy will almost push you out. You cannot say, I paid 10 million, can't you just give me 1 meter space to the right, to the left, front and back? It will never work. So if you are not getting direct benefits, what human beings will do is to reduce the amount that they have to pay. And that's why tax is a little bit difficult to administer. What I have done is to look at global best practice around the world, and I've analyzed them under 3 categories about what exactly we need to do to ensure that we improve the tax system further. I will commend the leadership of the FIRS and the FIRS team on the successes we have made, but the journey ahead of us is still far than where we're coming from. So we should never become complacent. I read a book about why nations fail, and they said that there are 3 most important things for any country to be able to develop. One of it is institutions. Number 2 is infrastructure. Number 3 is skills. If you have quality institutions, things will work. If you have infrastructure, it's easier to do business. If your people have skills, then you get results. You don't put round peg in square holes. So that makes things very difficult to achieve results. So the first thing I have there is institution and structures. Now, you need to set a vision. I heard when Mr. Aino was making the presentation about the FIRS operations and results, and I was very happy when he mentioned vision, but that everybody needs to buy into it. The fact is, people are inspired by vision, not by budgets. I have never seen someone who says, they've increased our budget to 5 trillion. I'm very excited. I can't find anybody like that in the FIRS, not even in private sector. But people are inspired by vision when they see that they are part of a bigger story that solves important problems in society. So it's important to set the vision, the purpose, and the values. And of course, there's law and reform. And I'm glad that we've spoken extensively about the role of legislation in tax administration. So I will not repeat that. But there's also strategy and key performance indicators. Now, if you know what you want to do, the next question is, how would you do it? And how would you know that you have succeeded? How do you measure performance? Anybody can come out and say, by the way, we've done so much. You need to clap for us. But it's better when I say, here are the numbers. And these are the things we have done. This is how we have done it. And this is what we're unable to do. And this is why. One of the things I'm going to be talking about later on is the quality of reporting. I have seen improvement in the FIRS, but like I said before, still a long way to go. It would be nice to have data that says, during the year, these are the number of inquiries we receive from taxpayers. These are the number of cases we reviewed. This is the amount we are being owed by taxpayers, not only the ones that are in dispute at different stages of dispute resolution. There are some taxpayers, they are not even debating the tax. They know they are owing it, they just don't have money to pay, and they haven't paid. The question is, are those debts collectible? How are we planning? Because it will impact on government, budget, expenditure, and everything else. The next thing after institution and structure is infrastructure and resources. Infrastructure and resources. So in the context of the tax system, we are looking at things like processes. What are the controls we have in place to ensure that things work as we have planned them to work? How about policies and rules, technology, data and insights? Sometimes, if you don't have the right information, you take the wrong decisions. But once you have data that is reliable, it will help you to be able to take the right decision. In fact, you can tell whether the decision is something to even start at all, rather than starting it and not being able to complete it. You can use technology for engagement. So it's not just about collecting tax. Can we use technology to engage the staff of the FIRS, the staff of the Joint Task Board, State Internal Revenue Services, Customs Service, and everybody that needs to participate in the tax system? Can we use technology to engage taxpayers? Do we have an app? Do we have online chats? Is it easy for taxpayers to do business with us as the tax authorities? How about efficiency of operation? You know, the FIRS currently gets 4% of non-oil revenue. And we want the revenue to go up. And then there's a request of, let the amount you give us also go up. And that makes a lot of sense. But you know, the best way to increase the amount the FIRS will get is to increase the amount of non-oil revenue, isn't it? So if that amount goes up, the 4% also increases. Now, globally, the cost of collection by standard, global standard, is 1% of the taxes you collect. We have made progress, but we're not there yet. Our cost of collection is still high. But I'm glad from the statistic that Mr. Fowler presented that rate is coming down. So that's good news. So essentially, what I'm saying is we must be able to use technology to gain efficiency. Maybe what you are using 200 staff to do, technology will do it, and you only need 5 staff. And in fact, they might even do it better. I am not in any way suggesting that we sack anybody. Actually, I'm suggesting that we hire more people. I looked at one report by the OECD, and they examined 55 leading tax authorities worldwide. And those tax authorities collected, on the average, $180 billion in revenue. What we collected last year, if you use government exchange rate, is about 13 billion. You see, small compared to those averages. Here's the other thing. The average number of staff in the tax authority was 36,000 staff. 36,000. I'm certain in my mind that FRA does not even have capacity up to 10,000 staff. So that gives you an idea of the journey we still have ahead of us. It's a long journey, but we have started. We just need to sustain the momentum and, if possible, fast track the progress we're making. We can use technology also for taxpayer service. And then agility. How agile are we? Are we adaptive? Or are we just reactive? So things will happen, we wait it out for 1 or 2 years, and then we say, actually, what's that thing they're talking about? You know, there was something I read that the central bank put out, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And it was about virtual currency. So everybody in this room must have heard about Bitcoin. So Bitcoins ride on the technology that is called blockchain. And Bitcoin is a form of virtual currency, cryptocurrency. There are so many others, but Bitcoin is most popular. CBN sent a circular to banks and said, don't invest in Bitcoin. Don't go there at all. And they say, if you have customers that are investing in Bitcoin, be careful what you do with them. So when I read it, I said, this doesn't help. There are countries where they've established a team to investigate and research into Bitcoin because they know that it might change the direction of the world forever, just the way money did. just the way the internet did. You cannot solve a problem by running away from it. There are questions about how do you tax Bitcoin. In case you don't know, people are exchanging Bitcoin. They have exchange in Nigeria. They are trading Bitcoin and they are making money. Bitcoin went from around $1,000 early last year to close to $20,000 by the end of the year, and then lost a little bit and came down to 15. We don't even know how we're going to tax it. So what I mean by that is, it's okay that we work hard, but we also need to take a step backward and say, are we proactive enough? Are we thinking about the things that will affect us tomorrow, and how are we preparing and responding to them? Number 3 is skill and culture, and that centers around people. Do we have the best fit? Do you have the right person doing the right thing? If you take the most intelligent lawyer and you ask them to go and do financial statements, you're asking for trouble, isn't it? The same way that an accountant will struggle to go and do the work of an IT person. It's not that the person is not smart. They say if you're going to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live the rest of its life thinking that it's very dumb. But it's not that the fish is dumb, it's because you're asking it to play to its weakness. So best fit is extremely important. Are our people enabled? If you ask someone to go and kill an elephant and you give them a knife, that is a suicide mission. So the size of the responsibility and the authority must be commensurate. So our people must be enabled. If you work for the FIRS, you must have the tools and the resources you need to deliver on your mandate. It's just reasonable to make that request. And our workforce, are they highly motivated? When people are motivated, they go beyond the call of duty. When they are not motivated, they are looking at the clock, whether it will soon be 5 o'clock, so that they can go home. And that makes a world of difference. Are they globally connected? Because you can also benefit from looking at what happens across the world. How about learning and self-development? The quality of training that we provide. If you hire the brightest people in Nigeria to work for any organization, including the tax authority, and you don't train them, I give you like 6 months. You'll be surprised at those most brightest people you hired will be behaving like they never went to school. Because things change very fast these days. So we must have quality training, and we must do it consistently. And then, last but not the least, is reward and sanctions. So if you ask me to do a very big and difficult assignment, and I do it well, you should just say thank you and reward me. If you also set the standards, and you enable me to do it, and I fail, there should be consequences. I should not just say because it's government job, there's job security, and do whatever I like. If I do that and I get away with it, not only have you done injustice to the system, the other person who is working hard will begin to ask themselves, why must I kill myself if there's somebody I know who is doing nothing and is still getting paid? So as a building block, these are the things you need to build the tax system, and ultimately, what are you looking out for? You are looking out for outcomes. How do you measure those outcomes? It will be on the ease of paying taxes. So I'm glad that we are moving up. So on the ease of paying taxes, we move up from 182 to 171 out of 190 economies worldwide. We have moved, but things are still very difficult. So we need to sustain that. We need to get to like top 20. Why can't it even be top 10? Those outcomes would also be tax to GDP ratio. So our tax to GDP ratio is still around 6%. So 6% is too small to sustain Nigeria's development. If you take, and I need to make this point, sometimes we wrongly think that Nigeria is an oil-rich economy. Nigeria is not an oil-rich economy. I'll tell you why. Even at about $70 per barrel, producing 2.2 million barrels per day, assuming there's no cost of production at all, our gross receipts from oil and gas is less than $100 billion. So $100 billion is barely enough to even fix roads. South Africa last year collected 25 trillion naira equivalent from taxes alone. That amount that South Africa collected is more than the money Nigeria made from oil, from gas, from federal taxes, from all 36 states of Nigeria, plus all the local government and customs service combined. And South Africa has a population about 1/3 of us, so which means we need even more money than South Africa. And I'm not even talking about the US or UK, I'm talking about a country within the continent of Africa. So I believe that we can do a lot more, but everybody and every stakeholder must work together to make this work, which is why I'm very excited that we have our lawmakers in the room to be able to help us with this vision. I think this is my second to the last slide, and it's talking about global best practice. And what I've decided to use was to find out the global standard for tax system and tax administration. And this was a tool developed by the IMF, and it's called Tax Administration Diagnostic Assessment Tool, TADAT. So what they do is, don't come and tell us that you are good and you are better than before, because we don't know what that means. Can we measure it? So that when we measure it, we can put numbers to it. This is where you were last year. You had improved by 2 points or by 10 points, or you had gone back. So that tool looks at 9 important areas of tax administration. I'll take you through them very quickly. The first one is integrity of taxpayer database. If I want to buy, I live in Lagos. I'm from Ondo State. If I have some money and I go to Abuja to buy a plot of land, I think Abuja is even easy. Let's say I go to another state. So let's say I go to Ekiti State. You know what tends to happen in Nigeria? They'll say you have not even paid tax, even though you are paying in Lagos. That person pretends that you haven't paid. They force you to pay illegal taxes because you want something from the state, even though it's against the law. Imagine we have a tax database that captures everybody in Nigeria, every company in Nigeria, so that when you just give them your number, they type it in and they can see everything. You know, life will be a lot easier. Not only should you have databases, there must be databases of integrity. Don't put my name on the system and it brings out 5 of me. It doesn't make sense. So it has to be that when you put an individual on the system, it can be uniquely identified. Effective risk management. What risks do we face as tax authorities? What risks do we face as the tax system as well as taxpayers? Supporting voluntary compliance. There is no way, even if we get to 36,000 staff for the FIRS, the capacity will still not be enough to monitor every single taxpayer. Therefore, we want to encourage voluntary compliance such that people do it themselves. And the people that the tax authorities have to tackle will be very few stubborn people. You know, there are some people who set out to say, whatever you do, me, I'm not paying taxes. So we need to have processes to support voluntary compliance, including filing of declaration, payment of taxes, and accuracy of reporting. Accuracy of reporting. If states and many government agencies have not remitted VAT to FIRS, some have not even remitted withholding tax, do we know exactly how much FIRS is being owed? We just know they are owing. We don't know exactly how much. Do we know how many of our taxpayers are delinquent? Do we know how many of them are struggling because of financial issues? Do we know how many of them are in financial services? How many of them are paying VAT? How many of them are in telecommunication and the other services? Sometimes the important thing from this information is not just for tax purposes, it's important for planning the economy because you have useful information to take the right decisions. Tax dispute resolution is part of the system. Governments, taxpayers, and tax authorities will not always agree. It will be abnormal if everybody just agrees with government. So it's normal to expect that there will be dispute in the process. So it's important that we establish a process that will allow us to resolve disputes in the most amicable manner. So I'm really appealing that we reconstitute the Tax Appeal Tribunal in this 2018. I like the idea of a tax court dedicated to tax matters so that when the FRS is about to lose a lot of money, the court will not say come back in November, even though we're in January. From my knowledge of accounting, based on the time value of money, even if you win in November, the money is always almost lost. You know, they invited me to one conference in Oslo. I think it was last year. I think it was early last year. This conference was on corruption. Initially, I was wondering why they invited me to come and talk about corruption. They said, no, I should not be annoyed, though. It's not that they are saying I'm corrupt. They just want me to share perspective from Africa. So I got there, and there was a guy from the FBI. Was one of the directors from the FBI. Was the guy who presented before me. He said a lot about Nigeria. So I was surprised how he knew so much about Nigeria. So I went to him after the presentation. He said, he's the one handling Abacha's loot case. I said, hey, you are the one we have been looking for. So I said, when are you returning our money? He said, they are not sure whether if they return the money, it will not be stolen again. I said, how is that your business? He said they want to be sure that the money will be judiciously utilized. I said, it's a convenient excuse. You have free money and you don't want to return it. If you do the present value of the money they said Abacha stole 20 years ago today, the value is almost zero. Because what you could have done with that money 20 years ago, it's far, far more than anything you can do today. So it's always better to try and prevent these things from happening. I actually think that tax is one of the most veritable tools for curbing corruption. You know, when you see somebody has stolen money, you can be in court for the next 15 years. But when I say you are owing taxes, I just need to establish that you are owing taxes. I can collect my money faster than the proceeds of corruption. And then we can then ask you, actually, where did you get the money from after collecting the tax? Efficient revenue management, accountability, and transparency is very important. So, lastly, what I have is a summary of global best practices, and I've put them into 4 buckets. Law and reform. Some of the leading authorities around the world include Australia, United Kingdom. United States does not used to be there before until Donald Trump. Donald Trump is claiming now that his reform is the largest and most significant in a generation in the US. And he's claiming, he's bragging about it. And I give credit to him because it's not easy to reform tax, especially in a country like the US. Then we have technology. There are countries now, like Estonia, where they say, don't worry about filing tax returns. You know, government will prepare the returns for you. What you just need to do is log into an account, confirm that the return we prepare for you is correct, and click on confirm. You don't even need to pay. As you are clicking on confirm, we know your account balance. We will debit it and send you the receipt. Why are they able to do that? Data and intelligence. Almost everything the taxpayer is doing, government is getting it because everything is connected. You use your ATM card to pay for grocery, they picked it. You enter a cab, they picked it. Of course, they're not able to pick all cash transactions, but the difference is not significant. So I'm sure that we can get to that level eventually. Number 3 is collaboration. I call it collaboration and integration. I already mentioned a bit of that, but I want to say a little bit more. So Professor Sonny said already that in Ghana, you have the Ghana Tax Authority, both customs and tax revenue authority. Same thing in South Africa, same thing in the UK. I know it's a long way for us, but what I really hope we get to is a point where we have one revenue authority at the federal government level. I'm not suggesting for the whole country, so somebody will not accuse me. Including customs, so that you have one authority. I would also encourage, it's good that we have lawmakers at this retreat. Next time, I would like to see customs in this room. I know we have joint task force, so that is covered. Because we have customs. God bless you, sir, for coming. So it's good for us to always work together because these issues are connected. And it's only one entity we are talking about, called Nigeria. Then the last one is reporting. If you look at the report by the South African Revenue Service, SARS, the report is fantastic. They will not just tell you the refund they have paid, they will tell you the time, average time it took them to process refunds. They will tell you how many taxpayers they have, individual, everything is properly, and you can Google it, so I'm not making it up. So I hope that we get to those kind of standards and even exceed them very quickly. So to close, I have exactly 1 minute. And here is my closing thought. It's a quote by the outgoing president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She said, and I quote, that Africa is not poor, it's just poorly managed. And I agree with her 120%. Thank you very much for paying attention to me.